spend the night up there, and then I have
Here
two
we
speaking
go.
engagements.
Here
Oh,
we
there
go. We are live. Welcome to the Living Undeterred Tour US live stream. What an exciting night, Mike. We have, I think we have 15 guests scheduled to come in and out in 15-minute increments. I'm your host, Jeff Johnston, and I want to introduce my great friend, Antarctic Mike. Mike, welcome to what should be a very fast-paced, emotional, and hopefully very impactful evening tonight.
Yeah, I'm very grateful to be a part of this whole adventure / cause. And I'm grateful that people tonight are going to tune in and help us tell and promote the story. That's the whole point of what we're doing.
Yeah, and for those people having issues with YouTube, we just had a notice that somebody said it wasn't streaming. So just bear with us. We'll fix the issue. But yeah, Mike, so really the tour is a mental health initiative. That's really what we're focusing on. I think, and I hate to say this, but I think it'll make our point tonight. Of the 15 guests we have, there's been 9 family members lost to either overdose, alcoholism, or suicide. And that's astounding to think of the passion we're going to have tonight, the people that are coming on, the guests we're going to have that have stories. And if they haven't lost somebody in their family, they certainly know somebody close that they've lost. And
well, not even for people that were lost, but people
right.
that are still here that are having a very difficult, a steep mountain to climb, and they're having a very difficult time at it.
Yeah, we had talked at length about the collateral damage impact that losing a loved one has. But I guess before we do that, just so people know about you, Mike, why don't you spend a few minutes? Everyone knows mostly about my story, but how we met, kind of what your claim to fame is, and why I selected you to join on this this mission.
Well, I have a dog in the fight, just like you, but my dog's a different breed. I'm Antarctic Mike. I reside in San Diego, California with my wife, Angela, of 32 years this June, and 2 cats, Shackleton and Yosemite. And I got involved in this last year when I met Jeff. The very first time Jeff and I ever met was in April of last year in 21. We were on a Zoom call, and he told me the story about his son, Seth, and how they had lost him in October of 2016. And Jeff said this to me, Mike, that event, as difficult as it was and still is, made me better, not bitter.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, okay, wait a minute. I almost fell out of my chair when I heard that. I'm like, wait a minute. Explain what you mean, right? So we just started talking and became very good friends very quickly, and really discovered that both of us have a real passion to help people in this space. Obviously, because you had lost your son, but my dog in the fight is my wife, Angela. Angela fell off a mountain in 1985 in Colorado. She fell 125 feet in a free fall. Her bones were broken in like 130 places, 160 places, something like that. And she's had umpteen surgeries and medications. And I mean, I'm halfway through pharmacy school and medical school just by my circumstance.
Oh,
and I have seen firsthand for 30 years, I've watched somebody almost like from the sidelines of the game. I've watched somebody play the game of life, handicapped and mentally, what's the right word? Deficient of all the tools.
Right.
And I've seen her come out the other side clearly better and not bitter. And so I understand firsthand the fight and the battle that somebody goes through when they have a traumatic event in their life, when they're on prescription medications, when they're coming off of those prescription medications. Like, I understand that. I've lived with it for 32 years. And so that's a big part of the reason why I'm involved in this project, because I know there's a ton of Angelas out there. And I know there's a ton of people like Seth and like others out there that we need to touch.
Yeah. Okay. So why Antarctica and why run an ultra marathon on the glaciers of Antarctica? I mean, come on, who does that?
Well, I I fell in love with a guy named Ernest Shackleton. Some of you may know the Shackleton story, the endurance story of 1914. Shackleton and 27 others got stranded in Antarctica in 1914 for 2 years, and they all came home alive. And the way Shackleton led this team of people was the most amazing story I had ever read in my life. And I was so inspired by that guy that I said, I want to walk in his shoes. So I literally signed up to run a marathon. The difference is this marathon that I signed up for was taking place on an ice shelf located 600 miles from the South Pole. Nobody had ever done this. This was the very first time this event was ever happening. And I hadn't run a marathon in like 20 years. So I was really not exactly, a fit for this thing. But you know what? The harder it was and the more difficult it was a better chance to walk in Shackleton's shoes. So for me, this was right up my alley.
And so, in honor of that, Shackleton's ship was called the Endurance. And so we've named the RV the Endurance too. And really, I think when you and I were talking about this, Mike, and I'll go back and before our first guest comes on in about 9 minutes, I'll talk a little bit about how the tour actually came about. But, going back and look what Shackleton did on exploration of uncharted area of the world. And we're kind of taking a mental health exploration. I'm not going around the country lecturing people on what to do. I'm on a mission to learn more about alternative methods and alternative ways we can help people. Because if what we were doing was working, we wouldn't be going on tour.
Right. There'd be
we
no
would just
need.
be building more rehab facilities and writing more books and prescribing more pills. But none of that's working. So, so I do want to tell a little bit about the backdrop. So everyone that follows my story knows I host a podcast called Living Undeterred. I wrote a book called This One's For You, An Inspirational Journey Through Addiction, Death, and Meaning. Very active on social media. Have met some absolute rock star people, including yourself, Mike. But in May of last year, I was feeling a little like I wasn't doing enough. And I think when you have attention deficit like we both have, and I'm competitive, I have imposter syndrome. When someone does well, I think to myself, well, I can do that too. So I was running on my elliptical one day in May of last year, and I got off and I got on Twitter. That was probably my first mistake I made that day. And I saw some guy riding his bike across the state of Iowa, raising money for breast cancer. And I thought to myself, well, okay, obviously this guy is passionate about breast cancer. And let me guess, his wife or his mom or sister got breast cancer. Well, it was his wife. And I thought to myself, I can do that. I don't want to do more podcasts or write another book, but I certainly could go. But I go, well, I don't want to ride a bike. And Iowa's too small. We already have Ragbri. So I stayed up that night thinking till like 3 a.m. And I came up with this insane idea to go buy an RV. I've never been in an RV. I've never driven one. And I put up a three-page business plan that night. I grabbed a stack of books in the morning. I drove up to Camping World and met with a couple of people up there, sold them my story. I think they were under the impression that I had already had planned this more than just 24 hours out, and ended up Camping World became our national platinum sponsor. They gave me a really good price on the RV, and that was it. And I came back, and I think I told you that night, and you're like, dude, this will kill you. You can't, because I was going to do it in July, like 60 days out. And you talked me out of it. You said, no, Jeff, you have to be intentional. You have to surround yourself around a good team. You have to build momentum, and you have to push this back to the summer of 2022. And that's what we did.
That
we pushed
was
it
so
back.
funny. That was so funny.
Yeah, we pushed
I remember
it back.
that phone call. This was only like weeks. This was only like weeks after you and I met. We had never even met in person. I know. And you called me, and I got to tell the viewers this. You called me, and you were a little nervous on the call. I could tell you were a little off balance. And you're like, Mike, I did something today, and you're going to shoot me. And I'm like, all right, what'd you do? Right. Well, it's okay. What'd you do? Well, I went out and I put a deposit down on an RV, and I'd never been in one. And I'd never driven one. Okay. Well, I'm not going to go. Okay. No, it's what I'm going to do with it, Mike. What are you going to do? I'm going to take it across the country, and we're going to go on a mission to change the narrative about mental health and substance abuse and addiction. I'm thinking, I kind of like this. I'm not going to get mad at you for this. And then you said, oh, no, we're leaving next week. This was last year. Like, we're leaving next week.
I was a little premature.
You're not going. I said, nobody is going anywhere next week.
Yeah, that would have been a disaster. But as it turned out, we pushed it back. We got a team. Our team is Ellen Ingram, Anthony Eaton, and obviously Antarctic Mike, Sarah Hoffman, and Molly Nordlock, and that's Team Living Undeterred. And they are rock stars. And everybody on the bus so far is passionate. Some of us have given up alcohol. Some of us have been through some traumatic events. And the people we are meeting, and I'm bringing on 3 guests to start us off tonight. And if Molly wants, she can probably, if they're ready, they can come in anytime. But these are 3 people that have absolutely changed my life. Each day, you and I are meeting more and more people. And their stories, each individual story is just so impressive how they've been resilient. And I'm honored to call them friends. I'm honored to be able to support them in their causes and their missions. And we're super excited. But I do want to say one thing, Mike, and we're going to talk about this as we get our first set of guests on. It's very important people realize that doing this mission is something that's going to be very expensive. I like to say that, this is something that's going to be, $5,000 or $6,000, but the reality is it's going to be very expensive to do this. To do what we want to do at the level we're doing, we're going to need lots of support, not just human capital support, but we're going to need financial support. So part of this tonight is to see if people can dig deep, can reach really deep inside, and can donate to the cause. And this will help us get going. We leave Cedar Rapids on May 7th, and we are lined up ultimately with 50 nonprofits, and some of them are here tonight to talk about their stories. And at the very end, when we split the money, that's going to be a very emotional day for me to be able to say, hey, thanks for supporting us initially when we just had this as a dream. And now we can pay you back by giving a donation. And I do want to say something that I had not told anyone on our team or even you, Mike, but I have a sticky note here to make sure I didn't forget. I am going to match 100% of whatever money we raise tonight. So the Johnston family, my 2 boys and I, we will match whatever's raised tonight, and I'll make a donation on the 7th when we have our kickoff in Cedar Rapids. But I just wanted to throw that out. So if you want to really multiply your investment today, if you put in 10, it's actually going to be 20. If you put in 100, it's going to be 200. So we're a 501c3. You can donate. I think Molly's going to provide all the links, and you'll get a receipt with a tax deduction information on it. But yeah, we're super excited, Mike, and people have taken time off their busy schedules. Each person coming on has a unique story. And I know we have, 10 or 15 minutes for each block of guests, but I want to make sure that they do more talking and less me. Because I want to hear some of their stories. I've got a quote, and you know what my quote is, Mike? It's on the back of my shirt. I don't know if people can see it.
Yep.
Purpose becomes passion when it gets personal. And I think for everyone here tonight, everybody here tonight, this is personal. And everyone, I see the names of the people that are commenting, and this is very, very personal. So, yeah, so we're 20 days out. There's Angela Kennecke from South Dakota. Angela, how you doing tonight?
I'm okay. How are you?
I'm doing good. We have a jam-packed 2 hours ahead of us, and I'm honored that you're here for 15 or 20 minutes of your time to talk to us tonight. I know you have to leave. We'll have you way out of here way before that. But so, Angela, you and I met on social media a couple years back. We then ended up meeting again later on. And, you and I both are part of a club that we're not, we didn't ask to join and we can't leave. But do you mind spending some time telling our followers and listeners a little bit about your journey and your story and what you do?
Well, of course. And I feel so privileged to know you, Jeff. I got so many messages after my story, or my daughter's story first went national and then international, that I probably just did a quick response. But then when you reminded me, that you had contacted me earlier, I was like, oh yeah, this guy. And I just really, like you said, we belong to this club of parents who've lost children. But the one thing about it is no one can truly know what someone has gone through unless they've gone through it themselves, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so we have a deep understanding. And I think that sense of community really helps us cope with our grief. That's what I think. And I can just tell you a little bit about what happened in my case. I'm a news anchor and I've been working in broadcast media for 3 decades. I'm also a writer and I have 4 kids and my oldest daughter, beautiful, talented, just an incredible artist, also an athlete, very, very smart girl. Started using weed and Xanax in high school and kind of got in, I don't want to say the wrong crowd because I've been criticized for saying that before, but really with our teenagers, it's the company they keep. At some point, parents lose a lot of influence over their kids and the peers have more influence.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know exactly why it happened, why she started using these substances, other than that she had some anxiety and some addictive, genes. And I really did everything in my power to try to save her life. But unfortunately, she died from fentanyl poisoning in 2018. And following that, I started the charity Emily's Hope because my gut just told me I don't want any other family to have to go through what I've been through. Of course, we know that thousands, hundreds of thousands of families have been through this. We know overdose rates are at record highs. Teenagers, their overdose rates have doubled in the last 3 years. And I hate it that this continues to happen because Jeff, you and I know that this is like the worst thing that can happen to a family, to lose a child in any way, and especially the stigmatized and shameful way of drug use. And I just felt like I had to stop it, and that's why I started Emily's Hope.
Yeah, I don't know if you know this, Angela, but the day of our stop is National Fentanyl Awareness Day.
I didn't know
I
that.
didn't know if you know. I saw it today on social
Uh-uh.
media, and I thought, what a great way to honor Seth and Emily to have our, you're pretty much our first stop after Des Moines. It's what a great way to just, I don't know if it's coincidence or fate, but to have that be National Fentanyl Awareness Day is pretty neat. So you've done so much in a short amount of time, because I was new to this in 2016. Emily passed away in 18. And you and I've talked about some of the signs. And I guess for any parent listening and watching, if you could go back and maybe learn, I don't want to say do over anything because that's a dumb question, but if you could go back and analyze the situation and learn, what would be some things you'd do differently, I guess? Or Mike, if you have a question too.
Well, I would say, Jeff, that we know we cannot change the past. And I think we as parents did the best that we could with what we knew, the materials, whatever knowledge and resources we had at the time. We certainly love our kids and did everything that we could. The only thing I would say is that we were planning intervention for Emily.
Yeah.
And this was about 3 weeks after one of her friends, who I didn't know, had died from fentanyl poisoning. I didn't know it was fentanyl poisoning. I knew it was drug related. And I just wish I hadn't waited. That's the only thing, and I waited because circumstances kind of made me, I had to find the interventionist. Our family had to meet. We had to plan it out because we knew that we knew something wasn't right. She wasn't telling us what she was doing. She was hiding it, as many people who are suffering from addiction do. I mean, no kid wants to disappoint their parents. No kid wants their parents to know that they're doing something, that's dangerous or that their parents would disapprove of, right?
Right.
I would just say, I have great instincts as a mom. I always have. And I always tell my girls and my boys, like, trust your instincts, trust your heart. And I just wish that I could have sped up that process. Do whatever you have to do. If you have to do an involuntary commitment, an intervention, whatever you have to do. And she was an adult, 21 when she died. If you have a minor under your house, get them into treatment. I mean, I'm just saying, like, do whatever is within your power, and then you will know that you have exhausted everything humanly possible to help your child. And that would be the only thing I would say. I feel like I was just floundering around because we don't have good systems in this country for addressing this issue. We don't have good systems for treating people in this nation.
Right.
And we need to do a lot better job than what we're doing. And I would say that I had so many things going against me in order to help my daughter. Society was going against me in order to help my daughter. So Yeah, I mean, that's a complicated question, and I'm not sure I gave
Yeah.
you the correct answer, but we can't change the past. And I don't feel any guilt. I went
Yeah.
through a lot of years. It's been 4 years now, and a long time I blamed myself, but
Right.
I don't do that any longer because I understand that this was my daughter's addiction. It was her addiction. It was not mine. And I did everything within my power to try to help her, and I couldn't. I couldn't.
Well, it's so admirable what you're doing, because part of what we want to do with the Living Undeterred tour is change the narrative. We also just want to get people to change their mindset. And for
Right.
us that are left behind when someone dies, it doesn't have to be the end of us. And, you and I, and your organization substantially, your last fundraiser was amazing. By the way, I still got to pick up my stuff I bought.
Thank
um,
you for supporting us. We really
yeah,
appreciate it.
it was awesome. But there's just so much powerful energy can come out of chaos sometimes. Hey, I see Garrett's with us. I want to do Garrett real quick. Garrett's our Des Moines stop, Angela. He'll be on the 9th, and after him, we're heading to South Dakota, and we're going to meet with Angela. So Garrett, real quick, why don't you tell us a little bit about you and why you're joining us on the tour?
Uh, I feel the fentanyl thing. I've in the last year, actually in the last 2 years since I got out of prison, I'm at like 14 close friends that have OD'd. I've been Narcan times. The amount of people I've Narcaned and the amount of people that I've performed CPR and saved their lives is
Oh my gosh.
my fort.
I'm so sorry, Garrett. I am so
Oh my
sorry.
gosh.
So I'm over 3 years clean, but
Congratulations.
thank you. Tomorrow is the day that 2 years ago I got.
Yeah, and we were just talking, Garrett, about Angela's success story. And again, I don't maybe success isn't the right word. It's that's not a good way to term this. How we've responded to
Yeah.
something traumatic. And you were imprisoned, and I was attracted to your story on social media. I think it was Facebook, because you run a nonprofit called Hard to Love. And why don't you spend a few minutes talking about what you do at your nonprofit?
Perfect. So Hard to Love, when I found out why I kept falling into relapse and stuff, and what my mind, my neural pathways were doing, the neuroplasticity was stuck. No matter, even if I was off of drugs, my homeostasis, my body's hormones were all drug. Didn't matter if I year clean, 2 years clean. When I found out how to fix that through fitness and nutrition, you can actually take somebody and rewire their brain in about 12 weeks to 6 months, about 3 to 6 months. And the studies show that 90% of the people who make it through stay sober a year or longer. That's because we're breaking down those neural connections. So we do 3 days a week of strength training, 2 days a week of yoga, and then we add in cooking classes where we do breakfast, lunch, and dinner meal prep. We're talking hands-on in a community kitchen. We cook for the community, and then we do money management classes. We do wants for me, budgeting with purpose, credit repair, where we actually run their credit and create a strategic plan for what they need to do to get better credit. And then we do job skills, where we connect people with jobs making a minimum of 18 an hour, upwards to 25, but jobs that won't take all their time and energy. It won't engulf them. We want jobs that they're passionate about, that they have room to maneuver, but also room for themselves to grow as a person and as a family member and partner.
Garrett, that is amazing what you're doing. I covered a story. I'm a journalist, and I covered a story in drug court in one of our communities here, and they were using yoga. They were sending people participating in drug court to yoga, and they talked to me about what a difference it made, in their recovery.
Right. The yoga and the mindfulness, she teaches you how to breathe correctly. She teaches you how to breathe with your stomach, but also when you're in anxious situations, you're starting to get depression. There's different types of breathing techniques that you can utilize to actually bring down your parasympathetic nervous system and get it back on track. So you're not in survival mode all the time. You can be in thrive mode. So
Wow.
Our goal and our mission, we partnered with Dads with a Purpose. I actually sit as a recovery director on there. They're transitional living. But our goal and our mission shifted in the last 4 months, where we're actually trying to connect all the recovery places in Des Moines and have them all understand each other, and trying to get something started where the people coming into recovery, they just bounce from one place to the other to find the place, and maybe an overseeing committee that actually sees them and actually gets them to the correct place, instead of just people bouncing here and that. We had a young gentleman the other week. He got out of prison, and within 2 days he OD'd in one of our houses and died.
Yeah, I think the death rates for prisoners on overdoses is like 200% higher than someone who's not in prison. And I can speak on behalf of my son Seth, was in prison, and he passed away 2 months after he was released.
Right.
And it was like he was thrown into society. We couldn't take him back into our house because I had my other 2 boys here. My wife at the time, she died in June, but she was battling her alcoholism and all her issues, and I couldn't. So was I, and I couldn't have him back in our house. I just didn't trust him. And then, 60 days later, he dies. And so again, I kind of feel like that there needs to be more attention to helping. Look what you've done after you've been released, Garrett. I mean, you're a tremendous role model for people getting released from prison, that there are opportunities to do good. And that's why I want your story to be just, broadcasted nationally as we're going on the tour. I'm real proud of what you're doing, man.
Thank you. We, with it, when that guy died, I reached out, and actually tomorrow I'm getting all the houses CPR training, because he wouldn't have died if they knew what they were doing. So I'm actually paying for that out of pocket. And then I'm getting all the houses. This is once a month. We're going to have a CPR class coming in and training anybody, because the success rates are so low right now. I want them Narcan trained once a month and CPR trained once a month. And we're going to have that on deck. And yeah.
Wow, Garrett, I really appreciate what you're saying. As you went through the program that people go through, and I heard the menu items on the program, I mean, I heard everything from mental help to physical help to exercise to eating, and it's like a whole package. And I can tell you, my wife was on prescription medications for psych issues and pain for a long time, like 25 years. And went off of everything 3 years ago. And I mean everything. And she has really chosen better, not bitter. And she is a completely different person in a good way. I mean, outside of the physical features of her hair and her eyes and her face, like I wouldn't know her. It's that dramatically different. And I look at her over the last 3 years and I go, what's led to this sustained change, right? Because it's all about sustained change. And I think she eats differently, she breathes, all those things you talked about, she does on a daily basis. And I'm sitting there going, that's why it's not just like flipping a light switch. People have to have significant changes in numbers of areas of their life. And you outlined a number of those areas. And it's not surprising that your program would be successful, because you're addressing the whole spectrum of the need. It's not just this thing or that thing. It's a whole series of these items.
Yeah. And Angela, you and I talked about coping mechanisms and how we need to, keep adding arrows to the quiver or tools to the toolbox. And yoga is one that I actually have to admit, that's the one thing I haven't done. I've done the meditation, I do the exercise, I eat healthy, but yoga is like the one thing that keeps pulling at me, but I just haven't, I just haven't done it yet. But it seems like to me, that would be just kind of a common sense one that would be very, very good to implement into some type of a coping strategy system,
And I think the key is to do it in a meditative way, to do your yoga in a meditative way, to see your yoga as its own meditation. And I think all of these healthy living things are great to incorporate. It's just that we have to treat the whole person. We have to treat mind, body, and spirit. And our current systems they're just not very good at doing that, right?
No,
So some are better than others, but and then the aftercare is so important. And that is where people tend to fall through the cracks. And we can do so much more, to check in on people and to give people that support system that they need. Because really the solution to addiction is connection.
Yes. I love
And
that.
if you feel connected to a group, a person, a cause, I mean, getting outside yourself and helping others. I mean, that's what's helped me in my grief,
Mhm.
and just learning so much about all of this. I think really we have to be all connected to each other, and we can't. That's why I always say like the stigma has to end, because we can't look at someone over here like this is the other person.
Mhm.
These are our children, our aunts, or uncles, or cousins, or our spouses. And people, if they're not directly touched or affected by this, they don't seem to care. And just even with the death rates the way that they are,
Mhm.
I just want to like say, hey, wake up. This is the biggest. I know COVID was a problem, but this is the biggest problem we have.
Sure it is.
Yeah, I have a
Yeah.
stat. I'm going to say it at when I speak at both your nonprofits. Is there's 800 people, Americans, a day that die from overdose, suicide, and alcoholism. 800, and just look at the effect that Emily and Seth and my wife Prudence had in our families and the generations to come. Seth had a daughter. She was born 3 weeks after he died. So Brighton doesn't have a dad and doesn't have a grandma, and she's 5. My mom just died in November. She was 89. I had a great life with her, and my granddaughter's robbed of that. And it's like the collateral damage is so strong and so powerful, but take 800 families a day. You wonder why mental health is such a big issue in our country. If it's not your sons or daughters, it's somebody else's that. And so it's imperative that we get a grasp on this. And again, I know, Angela, you got to scoot. I think that's a cue that you have to take off. I know you said you had to run, but wanted to thank you for participating, not just tonight, but I think South Dakota right now, I'm a little biased. I think it's my most favorite stop I have lined up, because you've done such an awesome job lining up everything. It's going to be so amazing. And the collaboration effect we're going to have is going to be unbelievable. I'm really excited.
Well, we all need to work together to end this epidemic. I mean, there is no way around it. We have to join forces. And I'm so excited that you're coming to South Dakota, and we're going to have a great event. We've got a great set of panelists. We've got a great location, and we're putting the word out. So we expect to have a good turnout too.
So if people want to go to South Dakota's event, they can just reach out to you, Angela, or through us, obviously.
Sure. Yeah. Emily's Hope.foundation. It's under our event page. We'll be blasting it on all of our social media channels. People can find me on social media, Angela Kennecke. I'm not hard to find. So we'll have lots of information for people out there, and just looking forward to it. It's going to be at Augustana University here in Sioux Falls, and we're having some college kids come too. So we are brand new building, brand new auditorium, and we've got a great panel of experts, and we've got you guys speaking, and can't wait to see you in person.
Well, I do have some family in South Dakota. My son's a Yote,
Okay.
a golfer at South Dakota. So I have to say, go Yotes. He's listening right now. Well, listen, Angela, let you run. I'm going to wrap it up with Garrett, and we'll bring on a couple more guests.
Thanks for having me. I look forward to seeing you on May 10th.
Have a great, thanks. Garrett, so real quickly, how do people reach your Hard to Love? What's the best way to contact you if people want to learn more about what you're doing in Des Moines?
Hardtolove.org, HARDTOLOVE.org, or just Hard to Love Facebook. We respond pretty much within the hour. There's a few of us that are monitoring. So,
and we're stoked. Your stop's going to actually be at the Capitol. So,
the Capitol.
Yeah.
I had a meeting with the state today. They're switching from prevention to recovery. And that's where we're really trying to make the difference. Is we finally started having those talks, and I felt pretty blessed to be a part of that talk today.
Yeah, we're looking forward to it. So again, thanks a lot for your participation, and we'll see you in a few weeks. All right, Garrett?
All right. Thank you, guys. Have a great day.
Thank you.
Thanks, man. Yeah, so there's just 2 stops. That's Des Moines and South Dakota, and you can see how powerful. That's my dog telling me he has to use the restroom, and I'm by myself. So I'm going to have to run real quick, let him out, then I'll come back. And actually, Rod and Deb, I'm going to do this. I'm going to introduce you, and my dog's giving me the death stare right now, but hold on, Camus. I'll be right with you. Rod and Deb, I want to introduce you. You two are become fast friends and acquaintances of mine. Again, you are part of this club that we didn't ask to join. Your son, Chad, actually died, I think, within 30 days of when we lost Seth. And boy, we have become fast friends. You guys run an organization called Crush in Cedar Rapids here, and you are massive advocates and mentors to me. You know, what you've done to elevate yourself to just a different level of living and living intentionally, I guess I would say, is something I admire immensely. So as you introduce yourself, I'm going to sneak out real quick and let my dog out.
Okay, that works good. All right. Dogs always get priorities. They definitely get priorities in our house. We had to just
Yes.
toss them out in the garage. But anyhow, it's super nice to meet you, to meet everybody and be part of this. It's somewhat humbling. You know, Antarctic Mike, I got to tell you real quick, my son is an ultra marathon runner. And he's never done anything that is quite as, you know, I think that anybody, you know, I run to the dinner table. You know, I'm a former Marine, and they ran us for punishment, and so that always stayed. It's like, you know, we're going to run you in the dirt kind of thing.
Right,
But,
right.
yeah, but he ran in Canada, and it's like it was a 24 hour thing, and he had to wear a bell because of the bears. I said, there's something wrong with you. If you got to run someplace, you got to bear spray
Yes.
and wear a belt so you don't startle the bears. But yeah, much respect, not only for that, but much respect for everything you're doing. I mean, this is incredible work. This is not easy work. And like Jeff said, you know, this is, you know, we're all, you know, involved in part of a club that we never asked to be part of. You know, Jeff compliments us, but you know, as far as being a mentor, but this guy is just, the work that he's done has been incredible. So, you know, I'm gonna stop there just for a second. I'm gonna let my wife Deb can I do a little bit of introduction for her. So she's the shy one. So she's like, you're going to do most of the talking, and then I always feel bad to get done. So Deb, just got to introduce yourself a little bit.
And then see what he does. I'm going to let my wife talk.
Yeah, and I already know what she's going to say.
Yeah.
Of course you do.
My name is Debbie, and I'm Chad's mom.
Mm-hmm.
And we battled with his addiction for 24 years before we lost him. And
Yeah,
it was tough. He was 38 years old when he died, and he had a wife and 2 little girls who now are being raised by our daughter. And she lives just 3 doors down from us. So we get to see the girls, you know, pretty much every day. But I sure would give up anything to be able to see him one more day, you know. So anyway, that's my story.
that's just a small fraction of our story.
Yeah.
You know, Debbie and I we're gonna celebrate our 50th wedding anniversary here in January, and we actually went steady for 5 years before. Yeah, we started going together when we were 13 years old.
Yeah.
And so we've lived life together. We have literally lived life together since we were teenagers. And when I asked her to introduce herself, and I said, I don't know if everybody heard me, I said, I know what she's going to say, because she says it repeatedly. I don't even know if she noticed she does it. She said, I'm Debbie, and I'm Chad's mom.
Yeah.
Because that was and is the most important role that she's ever played, was being, you know, the mother to our children. And she took that job seriously. And when she says, well, you know, we fought alongside of Chad for 24 years with his substance use disorders, and not only his substance use disorders, but his mental health. I mean, he started getting diagnosis when he was just a teenager, you know, and so the mental health, you know, is kind of a chicken or egg question, because, you know, what came first? You know, was it the mental health that led into the substance use disorders? Was it, you know, or vice versa? But the bottom line is it doesn't make any difference. They go hand in hand so much of the time. But a little bit about myself. I'm a person. I'm in long-term recovery. I've been in recovery for 38 years. I'm a retired probation parole officer. I'm a social worker by discipline. Let's see, what else can I worked for about 9 years in a work release prison setting as an addictions counselor. And at the same time, during the course of my career, I watched the system, I don't want to say fail, but I continue to see gaps in our system where it's like if things could have been a little bit different, if maybe somebody could be there just to kind of receive him differently when he came out of prison, to receive him differently when he went into prison. So just instead of trying to take every last shred of what was left of his self-worth to kind of embolden him a little bit. But anyhow, so I was working probation, and the Cedar Rapids is part of HIDA, which I don't know if everybody knows about HIDA, but it's high intensity drug trafficking area. So the feds, they identified Cedar Rapids as one of those areas. I was still working. They came and did a presentation, and I was like, how did I know so little about opioid use disorder? How did I know so little? I mean, I've worked it all my life. I mean, around it all my life. And they asked that for people to start a family and friends type support group, which we did, because it was like, I was just talking to someone today. It's like, we didn't quite know where we fit when it came to, it's like, who do we have these type of conversations with? Because, if I went to, if I went to somebody up at the hardware store and try to explain to them some of my life circumstances, they would just be befuddled. It's like they would, it would just become so awkward for the most part. So we started that 5 years ago, and we've continued to advocate. We do what we can here at the state level. I've tried to do what I can, as far as with different people in Washington D.C., as far as advocating for naloxone, advocating for medically assisted treatment, and our list goes on. And at the same time, support people, like not only in our community, but we do most of what we do now by Zoom. And we have two things that we really emphasize, and maybe Jeff will remember both these. But first and foremost is no judgment. No judgment. It's like I don't know what path you want to take for recovery, how that's going to happen, and maybe it's not going to happen today. And the second part is we have one job, and that's to lift each other up.
Right.
So that's kind of the basis of it. I know Jeff has something. I mean, Jeff and I have had enough conversation. He knows he's got to interject if he wants to.
Well, I was just going to say, I got about 2 or 3 minutes with you guys, and I got to bring in the next set of guests. But what you guys are doing as advocates and inspirations for people like us, that are looking up for people that are already doing things. And the Crush organization in Cedar Rapids has been awesome to attend as much as I can. I love your gratitude saying you do at the end of the meetings, and just the love in those meetings is just overflowing. And hearing people talk about their recovery stories and about their relapses and about their release from prison. And it's like, I think instead of thinking of us in a canoe going against the stream, we're in this massive boat all together. And all of our stories are unique to us, but they all have very similar pain and suffering involved. So really, I'm grateful for you guys to be a part of this. You guys will be at the May 7th kickoff, which I want to do a couple house cleaning things. May 7th at the Cedar Rapids Marriott is our kickoff, and Mayor Tiffany O'Donnell will be our keynote speaker. We have Rod and Deb there as well, helping out. We have a great panel discussion lined up. And again, very grateful to be able to do that and have Cedar Rapids support us. Also want to remind people, all the information is on our website, livingundeterred.org. And also, I talked about earlier about the importance of donations. Nonprofits are on thin margins anyway. Ours is on very big thin margins because we've committed to go around the country in an RV, and unfortunately, those aren't free. So any donations people can make, I've committed to match 100% whatever we raise tonight in donations. If we have a QR scan code right there on the screen, you can go to our website, click on the donation, and I will match 100% today. So I'm really excited about that. So Rod and Deb, I appreciate what you guys are doing. Keep living undeterred and keep Chad's memory alive. We have an RV with 4 or 5 people in it, but there's a lot of lost souls in that RV with us. That are going down the highway every day. Hundreds of thousands of people in the RV with us. So, with that, you guys have a great night, and thank you so much for being on the show tonight.
Thank you, Jeff.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Nice to meet you.
God bless, folks. Thank you.
Yeah, and Rod will be speaking at the
Wow.
breakfast too. So, yeah, great story.
Good.
It gets more personal, and that's why that quote that I use, Mike, purpose becomes passion when it gets personal, is so true.
Yeah, it's very true.
A day doesn't go by where I meet 4 or 5 people like this, almost every day now. And
yeah, until
really,
it's somebody you know or in your family,
right.
It's just another news story. It's another statistic.
Yeah. So again, I'm very grateful for anyone that can make donations. I mean, every dollar counts. Someone said, "How are you going to get $1 million?" And I said, $1 from 1 million people.
Exactly.
That's one way. That's probably the hard way to do it. But we hope as this thing gains momentum that we can get a lot of support. There is 2 of my favorite friends. I've actually met one of these people, and I'm going to meet the other one soon. Brian Wall from the beautiful area of Boynton Beach, Florida, and Amanda Faith is from Redding, California, near Sacramento. So, Brian, Amanda, welcome to the Living Undeterred live stream tonight. And again, just so honored to be advocates with you, and more importantly, being friends with you too. So, Amanda, we will have you go first. Maybe give a background a little bit about you and how you and I met, and we go from there.
Well, I dove into advocacy after losing my 13-year-old son to fentanyl poisoning. I knew that his story could make a difference, and so I kept sharing it, and any news outlet that would give me time of day, I shared it, and that eventually paid off, and I've been some pretty big places because of it. And now I'm on the Living Undeterred tour.
You were on a show. I think it's a small show. I think they call it the Dr. Phil show. Where
Yes.
you and I think 3 other families talked about children that had died. Now, in your case with Luca, it's such a different story. It's kind of that new paradigm that we're seeing today. Most of the people that have passed away from these fentanyl poisonings haven't been 13-year-olds, buying this stuff on Snapchat. And that was Luca's case. And so it really opened the eyes to pretty much every parent, like, holy crap, if this can happen to a 13-year-old on Snapchat, I better understand what's going on. And so,
and that's exactly why I've marketed his story so much for awareness. I like to bring everybody into the camp because fentanyl doesn't care if someone is 13 or 30 or if they have an SUD or not.
Right.
And I realized my privilege, my real privilege. I'm not judged as the parent of an addict. My son is not judged as just another junkie. I mean, we've all heard it. It sounds horrible to say, and I have the privilege of that. So in sharing Luca's story, I try to point out that while I'm getting justice, many people aren't. So.
Yeah, well, like I said, I am just absolutely awe-inspired by your work, Amanda, and you and all the other people that I'm meeting on social media and Facebook. It seems like to be the biggest home of these voices. Some amazing people out there that have been through some really tough times, and it provides inspiration and hope for the next generation of moms and dads that have to deal with this stuff. I'll come back to you in a minute here, Amanda. Brian, thanks for being on the live stream. You and I go back a long ways. You were one of my first guests ever on the Living Undeterred podcast, along with Mike. And you've been a massive advocate. And I finally had a chance to meet you when I was in Florida. And you and I hugged it out, and we talked, and we had a great lunch. But tell a little bit about your story and why you and I connected.
Yeah, I've been a mess most of my life, honestly, and finally got to a place where it caught up with me, and just addiction in my own life, and how that kind of crossed over in what I do professionally, and almost lost a chance to have an impact on others professionally by allowing that to happen. Addiction got the best of me, and now I'm doing my best to live daily and maintain balance in my own life. And I'm just another guy trying to figure it all out in hopes that I can have an influence on somebody out there that's a positive influence, and they can pay it forward. And so just super pumped about being involved or connected with you in any way. Jeff, I appreciate what you're doing, man.
Well, you're more
Super
than just
solid.
another guy. You are one of the most influential people I know on LinkedIn, and I love
Thanks.
following your posts. You come from that clinician mindset, but you come from being in the recovery, being in recovery, and there's immediate credibility when I read your posts, and you have a large influence on a lot more people than you probably realize on social media. So that's why I wanted to meet you, and I've had you involved in all my projects from the get-go. So I know you're going to be our local advocate or one of our local advocates for our Fort Lauderdale stop. Which I think, and Amanda, we're going to plan on being in your area on the 18th of May. And then Brian, we're looking at, I think July 27th is when we're coming to Florida and do that stop. So we're super excited. So, Amanda, I'm going to go back to you for a second. So you have some projects you're working on. It seems like that'll probably be something you'll be doing forever. But you recently been interviewed by some pretty large magazines and some organizations, and maybe can you add a little bit on some of the projects that you're working on and maybe some of the things you got lined up down the road?
Yeah, well, most recently on the 18th, Luca and I were featured in People magazine. The Faces of Fentanyl Poisoning. The name was picked after my own page. So I was pretty elated about that. Like I said, I've been sharing and sharing and sharing, and so it was the Swedish news and then here and here. And so Luca's story just evolves and keeps traveling. And, I'm not going to be doing this forever. I joke with all of my close friends saying, once I get to the top, I'm going to quit. And there's a reason for that. I mean, burnout when you're an awareness advocate is very, very real. And
right.
I've been open and honest about that as I went, because I've been writing a program called Healing Through Advocacy. And it's not just for fentanyl poisoning awareness advocacy, but all advocacy, whether it be mental health, cerebral palsy, autism, whatever. When we are using our pains and our traumas to help encourage, inspire, and educate others, then we're living the best life that we can. So that's what I'm doing.
I wanted to give a shout out. Angela Marie says, love for Luca is strong. And Angela is awesome. I met her on Facebook as well, and she's a beautiful soul. She has a program
Never
where
alone.
she has shirts, and I got my Never Alone Seth shirt, which we're going to wear on the tour. And I had her on the podcast as well. And what another just incredible person I met that, was thrown into this and has taken it as living undeterred. That's really what all of us are doing. All four of us tonight. Every guest is. Now, you guys all know that living undeterred certainly doesn't mean living untested, right? We're all tested every freaking day.
No, but with the right support,
right,
we are enabled to live undeterred. Yeah,
exactly. And exactly. I think some people think that, they see the smiles on our faces, they see us laugh, they see, I try to make an emphasis of laughing and crying and learning every day. And that's something I learned from Jim Valvano's speech, the ESPY award that he won, which is one of the greatest, to me, one of the greatest motivational speeches I've ever heard in my life. And he was dying of cancer when he gave it. And he died like 2 months later. But he said, if you're not laughing and crying and learning every day, you're not having a full day. And I thought, well, you can still lose a child and lose a spouse, and you can still laugh. Nobody says you can't laugh. You can love again, you can have a great life. And I think that's what we're trying to teach people in this living undeterred mindset, and it can be done. There's living proof tonight. There's going to be a number of other people coming on that have similar stories that have been resilient, and doesn't always involve the death of somebody either. It can be fighting cancer. It could be, recovery from meth addiction. It could be sex abuse. I've got a couple stops where the tour stop is going to be talking to people that started nonprofits for sexual abuse. That's a whole nother angle of mental health issues that we have. So Brian, back to you again. So I have a question for you, and I'm going to give you the hardest question of the night, but is, what's going on? Why is our country in such a poor mental health shape? What are the reasons? We have more abundance, we have more connectivity than we've ever had before, but we seem to be the least connected that we've ever been. What's the problem? And when you answer that, I'm going to go let my dog in. Sorry. The only one in my house right now. So
go do you. Yeah, I think, likewise with connection, there's a lot of availability and accessibility to a lot of things that are not healthy for us too, and not being brought up in a time that manages. I feel like everything has evolved so quickly, and we've not been properly adjusted as a society on what to do with all this stuff. And so we're kind of adjusting in real time, and that's gonna include some falls. We're gonna fall and get hurt, and we're gonna skin our knees up, and even worse, we're going to lose lives. And, I was talking to my wife tonight. Girls, I got 2 girls, and my oldest is giving me a headache about some things. And so we were just kind of talking it out as mom and dad, like, yeah, what do we do with this? Like, is this crazy? Should this be a button? Should we hit the roof on this? Like, what do we do? And my wife was like, when I was 12, I wasn't doing this. I'm like, babe, that's irrelevant. Like, when you were 12, like, I didn't have a phone when I was 12, right? And now you have all these things. So we got to operate in real time. And before, when you were 12, they didn't have the pandemic. Nobody knew what that was, and nobody knew how to
invented fire when I was 12, Brian. Come on.
Yeah, right. They didn't have fire back then, right? No, but one of the biggest things.
This conversation certainly wouldn't happen.
No.
One of the biggest things for me, Jeff, is like I'm seeing it more and more in the field. It's still kind of fresh, and I think it deserves a lot of noise. Is just connecting mental health and addiction, and how closely related they are, and understanding how incredibly closely linked trauma is to those aspects of your life evolving and into whatever it becomes, and trying to figure out how to manage it. I mean, they're all so closely connected, and I think for so long we've kind of separated them, we've differentiated them in ways that didn't need to be differentiated, and it's kind of caused some confusion. And I think we need to bring it all back together and help folks get a better view of exactly what got them to that place, and how do we get through it, and what do we need to be aware of, around the next corner. And that's kind of my love, my passion. I'm not seeing it a lot in a lot of the treatment centers, and we're kind of old school in a lot of our approaches, and I think we got to freshen stuff up a bit.
Yeah, they're still stuck. They're still stuck. A lot of them in the old school, the Middle Ages, as I like to say. I want to give a shout out to Christopher Krupar. I just met Christopher today. His son passed away as well, like ours did, Amanda, from the same fentanyl. And he says age of misinformation or an overabundance thereof. And we had a great, really, first time meeting the guy, we had a pretty deep intellectual conversation. We had a lot of very similar philosophies, but and he's awesome. And you guys got to meet him. He's out there. He's got love. I think it's called Loving Life After Loss is his project. And he's just out there living undeterred, and he's not, he doesn't have a lot of the resources and so forth, but he's certainly out there. I just met him today. I'm going to get him on my show as a guest. Another person that I can just start adding to this. It's funny. I was talking to, I think it was Amanda. I said, as you get older, you kind of get your circle of friends, you start to get everybody gets a little bit smaller. It's not happening in my world. I mean, I'm adding more and more and more beautiful humans to my life. And it's like, I'm going to be 80 and I'm going to have more people when I'm 80 close friends than I did when I was 20. And I think that's the beauty of this journey that we're all on, is that we're just meeting. Yeah, I got to get to 60 first, but my dad's listening. Shout out to my dad. He's 89. Doc Johnston is awesome. I learned a lot of my resiliency from my dad. But again, so far, the comments have been great. Unfortunately, I haven't been able to read them all, but let's see. Celeste says, I'm a friend of Amanda's, so I'm also a friend for you all. Well, thank you, Celeste. We welcome you into the friend club. It is actually nice to smile and laugh, you know, Amanda. You and I have spent too much time curled up on the floor crying, and Mike and Brian, you as well, for, you know, whatever our own reasons are. It's nice to just have a moment where we can be grateful for friendship and love and compassion and empathy. And, you know, none of us are looking for sympathy and pity, right?
No.
And that's an important part of this process, because I think there are a lot. I'm not looking for it either. I have no time for it. I'll take empathy and compassion and strength and love, but sympathy and pity, I don't have any time for that. I like when people say, I feel your pain. What can I do to help? You know, that's great, but I don't need people feeling sorry for me.
Right.
You know, I just don't have time for that.
And
you guys
I
have
don't
anything
really
to
want
add?
other people to feel my pain. I don't necessarily want other people to feel my pain. I hope they never do, and that's why I do what I do. So
Well,
when
you're
people
saving
say
lives,
I feel
Amanda.
your pain, I think I might close off the conversation at that point.
Yeah.
No, I love what you're saying. I love what you're saying, Jeff. I think the world needs more of it. It's not about sympathy and all these emotions and stuff necessarily. It's simply meeting people where they're at and validating them and understanding and educating. You know, like, we're all in this together. We got to figure it out. And if we pull together as a village, man, I tell you, plates stay full a lot more often. People sleep safe, and we take care of each other, and we love each other, and we're in this together. Whether we like each other all the time or not, we're in it together, and we got to figure it out. And so, love what you're doing, man. You guys travel safe, and Mike, I owe you a big hug as well, brother. I can't wait to meet you.
Look forward to seeing you when I'm in South Florida with the crew.
Right on.
No, Mike wants to meet you in Antarctica, Brian.
You can send me a postcard. I love you, though.
Yeah, I get it.
Well,
I
listen,
get it.
Amanda and Brian, keep smiling, keep saving lives, keep doing what you're doing, keep living undeterred, and I'm honored to call you both very good friends of mine.
Back at you, man. Love you guys. Nice to meet you, Amanda.
Absolutely.
Take care, sweetie.
Thanks for having
Right.
us.
Good night.
You too.
Good night.
Thanks, guy. Man, I could do this all night, dude. I could just bring on guests for like 6 hours. I mean, how inspirational it is to talk to people like this. And that,
Wow.
imagine going on tour for 95 days and doing this, Mike, every day. I mean, you know, there's no downside other than I may go broke, but I'll worry about money later.
Fatigue.
Money's replaceable, but you know,
Yeah.
this thing's going to be amazing. And I'm just, again, honored and humbled to be able to have the ability to reframe my life. You know, I mean, that's something that I go back to college when I learned stoicism, and I learned about reframing, and I learned it from my dad, you know, about looking at the opportunity in things. And then Viktor Frankl in his book, Man's Search for Meaning. You know, these are all pivotal points in my life. And I sure, you know, Mike, it's Ernest Shackleton for you. You know, talk about a guy that never made excuses, that could have quit so many times. You know, and he went back and then saved his men, you know. A tremendous story, a great story. But
and
I know
we have more. Okay. The irony is when you start to find purpose, it's ironic that purpose is sometimes grounded in tragedy and in difficulty. I mean, that seems so counterintuitive, but there's a lot of truth to that.
Hey, James, how you doing, man?
I am doing well. It's good to see you. I was looking forward to this all day.
Yeah, it's great to see you again. James, boy, I'd say I'm so lucky to have crossed paths with him. I was a chance to be on his podcast that he has. It is probably, I don't know, to me, what my aspiration is to have a show like James someday. The way you run everything, and your guests have been great. And you've been an advocate for mental health for a long time. You were in private practice for 14 years, I think. And why don't you tell our listeners and followers and people that are watching this tonight a little bit about what you do, what is lifeology, and where the problems are with mental health today. Why are we struggling as a society so much?
Well, first off, thank you so much for allowing me to be a part of this. I'm truly honored, and I'm so happy to be a part of this moving forward as well. You know, before we get started, I wanted to tell you a little bit about my story. When I was 18 years old, actually 17 years old, I really struggled with depression. And when I was in in that moment, I had a lot of teenage angst. And unfortunately at that time, or maybe fortunately, I was in a hospital for a few days. And when that happened, I really realized that, gosh, there is something obviously wrong with me, but there's really something wrong with the mental health field, because I'm sure the people were great, but I found for myself that I wasn't really getting the care that I needed. And what's interesting though, Jeff, is, hello, Mike, by the way, it's nice to meet you. But what I found also is that, in that time, I made a vow to myself. I said, if I can do anything for anybody, I will do that. So 4 years later, I got my undergrad in psychology, and then I was at a psych tech at this company, and all of a sudden they put me back in the same hospital I was in when I was 17 years old. So I walked into the unit, and I was so overwhelmed and so empowered because I had the keys to this unit. So here I am, 4 years prior to that, made this vow to help whomever I could. 4 years later, I'm here, I'm working, and I had the keys, and nobody knew who I was, of course. I did recognize the same people from before, but that was so empowering for me. And I really realized that I had something that I wanted to offer. I had something I wanted to give to people. And so fast forward, I was in my private practice for so many years. And then I just knew that, okay, I'm doing really well, but in my personal life, I wasn't really feeling fulfilled. So I wanted to create Lifeology. And so that's how my radio show started. And I've been blessed to have the huge audience that I have. But, working in the mental health field for so long, I think so many times people forget that, specifically when it comes to addictions, that the majority of the people who have the addiction, they don't necessarily want to. So I always separate between the person who is the person that we know, and then you have the person who uses. And so when I do it like that, I don't mean personality disorders or dissociative identity disorders, anything like that, but more in the sense of, you think about it this way. So you wake up in the morning, you're doing really well. And all of a sudden around noon, you think about that person who's been partying all night, and all of a sudden they wake up and like, oh, I want to do this again. So you'll find the first 4 to 5 hours when someone wakes up, they have this realization that that things are not right. They have this pain, they have this loneliness, they have this sadness. But then once around 1 o'clock happens, and all of a sudden people realize, well, okay, maybe I want to go back and do this again. So that's when the thoughts start to creep in. And when those thoughts creep in, that's when things start to change for them. And so then all of a sudden they go into the addictive cycle. So for people who do use, and unfortunately it is a very painful thing, but it's also, there's a difference between the aspect of the person who is the person we all know and love, but then once the addict person starts to wake up, that's when things start to change. So unfortunately, that is what things happen. And unfortunately for you as well, when people do suicide, that is not something they often want to do or mean to do. And that's really one of the most unfortunate aspects when it comes to addictions, because there's so many people who want to live, but unfortunately when things like that happen, that's when we have the trauma and the sadness, unfortunately, that you and your family have experienced as well.
What's your thoughts, James, on codependency, and where does that come into play for addiction and substance abuse and even mental health today?
A lot of times when it comes to codependency, a lot of people want to fix something, but when they want to fix something so bad, so their intent is really good, but the intent doesn't necessarily mean that that's the behavior that needs to happen. So if I want to help someone, I will do everything I can to help that person. But if it now comes to the place where I've taught them what's called learned helplessness. Learned helplessness is that aspect of life when we do something for someone for so long that they forget that they actually have something they can do for themselves. And so when I help someone and keep helping and helping and helping, unfortunately, that is doing them more of a deficit or creating a deficit for them, because they're not learning how to self-soothe, not learning how to be this person that can actually live life in their own way. So that's how a lot of codependency happens. We don't necessarily call it that because we don't think that's what we're doing. Right. But unfortunately, learned helplessness is something that's very common, very chronic when it comes to aspects of people who want their spouse, their child, their family member, their friends to get better. And so they keep making excuses, or they keep doing things. They keep finding treatment providers. They keep finding different substance abuse groups. So they keep doing that. And unfortunately, that allows for the person who's using to not have to grow and develop, because that person is now doing everything for them. So it's almost like a symbiotic relationship, which then unfortunately allows the person who's teaching the learned helplessness to then not allow the person who's struggling to actually do what they need to do to find their own sobriety.
I've been listening to a lot of podcasts. Obviously, I'm only 5 years kind of new to this mental health, substance abuse, addiction world that I'm in now, and it seems like there's a lot of emphasis on people's poor expectations with the reality of life. So, in other words, something like death happens, and they act surprised when in reality we're all going to die eventually. Sure. It just doesn't always happen in the order that we prefer. Yeah. And so I think I wanted to ask your thoughts on expectations, and sometimes people live in this fantasy world today where it's, I I just don't think we're preparing, especially our adolescents, on dealing with adversity and pain and suffering. And it could be a function of parents coddling or things like that. But what's your thoughts on expectations, and how can people prepare themselves better mentally prior to events happening, so when they do happen, they're not, it's not the end of their life?
Well, and there's so many wonderful parents, and everyone has this ideal that we want to be the best parent. And of course, many people do fantastic jobs with that. But what I often find when I work with people is there's a difference between an ideal relationship or ideal life that they create for the child versus a realistic life. And so a lot of parents will often create this buffer they create a world, an environment where it's so ideal and optimal that the child doesn't have to feel what sadness feels like, or what discomfort feels like, or what those other non feel good emotions are. So they create this world, and when that happens, then all of a sudden the self-resilience isn't there, the self-soothing aspects aren't there. So when life does happen, unfortunately, if, let's say, someone, unfortunately, everyone got trophies before, everyone got some type of trophy, which is fine. There's nothing wrong with that. But in teaching that, there's not understanding that there's a realistic world out there. And so when kids grow up, the realistic aspect of that versus the ideal aspect of that, there's often a disconnect. And that's where you'll find that many people really struggle with that. So to piggyback on what you're saying, unfortunately, a lot of people haven't learned how to self-soothe. Without going too much into detail of this, self-soothing behaviors are basically based off of your 5 senses. So when we're little kids, our 5 senses determine how we're going to deal with life. So if you have your sense of taste, sense of touch, sense of sight, sense of hearing, sense of smell, all of those create addictions. So as a kid, when you're trying to self-soothe, if you don't know how to do that, you will then, as an adult, use one of those 5 senses, and that's how your addiction will come out. Your sense of taste, that's how overeating happens. It can also be how your sense, or just also addictions as well. Sense of sight, if they're not able to do that, that's where, let's say, pornography is difficult for some people. That's how that can be an addiction. So there's many different aspects of the 5 senses that are used. And so when people don't really realize that, as adults, we use our default version of how we try to self-soothe. And then all of a sudden, as adults, we then use our adult version of that, which doesn't work anymore. And so we're like, why do I keep doing this? Well, it's because you had a default version of your 5 senses that you used as a kid. And so now as an adult, if you can figure out how to differentiate between that. So your sense of taste, you can still use that for self-soothing. But if you've learned that you've conditioned yourself to self-soothe your sense of taste for, let's say, carbohydrates or starchy foods or whatever it might be, you can still use that, but you have to learn how to retrain yourself to still use that default sense to be able to help yourself move through whatever the emotional struggle is you have.
Yeah, there's a sense of evolution, I guess, of self, right? As we go through different stages, not just stages like ages, but I mean stages of life events where, somebody dies, and then you can actually, something can be born out of that. You may have to create it yourself. Maybe you write a book, maybe you do a podcast. But I wanted to give you a shout out, James.
Which is a creative legacy as well.
Mom D Cherry, I think, or Sherry. I follow James Miller with Liveology from the beginning. I'm thankful for the skills he imparts, life-changing. So
that's sweet. Thank you. I really appreciate that. That's really kind of you. Thank you.
James, I have a question.
Sure.
I look at my wife Angela's situation. My wife had a very traumatic accident when she was in college in 1985, and she's had a lot of difficulty in her life. And she was on prescription medications for quite a long time. 3 years ago, decided I'm done, went off of all of the medication, all the psych meds, all that stuff, right? And she has gotten so much better. And I look at this and I go, okay, what was the impetus as to why she got better, even though she's not on the medications? And what I see is she's had this tremendous courage to face the trauma that warranted her going on the medication in the first place. And I look at medication as, whether it's prescription or illegal, I look at medication. I saw her medication as a curtain that she would hide behind. You have this traumatic event and you're terrified. You can't function. So what do? You hide. You take the pill. And the pill allows you to exist, but doesn't allow you to live, because you're just living in fear behind this curtain. And now all of a sudden the medication's gone, and it's like there's no place to hide. And so she's now had to, almost like I picture her on a stage in a theater, like in bright lights, completely naked, now having exposure, full exposure to the trauma that warranted her going on the medication. And it seems like people have to have a tremendous amount of courage to face those things that terrified them. I mean, can you speak to that?
Sure. Well, first off, congratulations to her. That sounds fantastic. What is it, 45 years that she was on that and she stopped? Congratulations.
Yeah.
Of course, we always want to, any type of medications that are prescribed to us, we always want to talk to our licensed provider if we're going to remove ourselves from that or stop taking
Right.
it. But, you know, it's interesting because when it comes to resilience, there's been a lot of studies that talk about resilience. And so you're absolutely right. When somebody goes through a traumatic event, you often will want to take something because there's a difference between the physiological response that your body creates, and then you have the emotional response that your body creates. So when someone is struggling, of course, the physiological aspects of that is going to be, that's how medication works. So psychopharmacology, the psychopharmacological drugs, fancy term, when those are used to help people decrease their anxiety or whatever it might be, that is specifically what happens. And then you'll use a form of cognitive behavioral therapy. Cognitive behavioral therapy is a form of talk therapy. There's other modalities. Jeff, you and I have talked about EMDR when you were on my show before, and I talked about that. I can talk about that later if you want. But when it comes to the first aspects of when people are experiencing it, yes, it's so hard because if someone has some form of PTSD, so let's say they have let's say a really loud horn, like someone honks their horn, comes by, you know, a lot of times fire trucks or police cars, when they go by, it can really trigger a lot of people because that's a physiological response that your body creates when it comes to trauma. And so whatever happened with your wife as well, and I'm so sorry that happened, but that is probably the response that happened. And so over a period of time, the body doesn't have that stress response. And so if we continue to take those things, which is fine as long as you talk with your doctor, but when you have a certain period of time that you take that, you don't necessarily need that anymore because your body doesn't respond the way it did before. Yes, the medication is working, but because that much time has passed, you're that far away from the trauma. When you're that far away from the trauma, it's not going to affect you as much. So the fact that I'm assuming she talked with the doctor, she's reduced that medication. She's now working on something. So because there's been so much distance there, she is able to now look at life and say, I don't necessarily need that anymore. And so that is something I always have my listeners and my patients do is talk with your doctors. If there's medication is incredibly important, but it's also often good to know when is there a time period that is medically mandated that perhaps you should reduce some of that or perhaps look at something more. Once again, that's not under the auspice of my license, so I can't speak to that, but that is something you always want people to talk about. But going back to your point about resilience is incredibly important. So many times people think, I just don't know how to deal with this, but it's not about dealing with something. If you were able to experience something and you got through it 5 minutes later, well, that's a form of resilience. Now it's 10 minutes later, you're still alive. That's still resilience. So resilience doesn't necessarily mean that you're like Rocky from the movie where, you run, you win all these things, but it's more essentially, were you able to walk away? Our body is created in such a way that when trauma happens, there's so many physiological responses, so many mental health responses that happen that allows us to be safe. When I was in my undergrad, one of the dissertations was a dissociative identity disorder. What that basically means is when someone experiences a lot of trauma, your mind actually fractures, but which keeps you safe. So every animal has some type of response. So a skunk has their smell, a possum plays dead. So we as humans have our own responses as well. So we have these forms of resilience that we just don't realize. And so when going back to what you were saying earlier, Jeff, as far as the way we look at life, if we haven't really experienced a lot of trauma before, don't really know what to do, we don't know how to deal with it. But our body by default will work through trauma in such a way. So if you're taking breath or able to take a breath, you've worked through that trauma. You're passed through that trauma, I should say that. So, excuse me, when you pass through that trauma, that means you have more resilience. So resilience is essentially just taking another breath. And so the more breaths you take, you're working through that. Now, are you actively doing that? So are you just existing or are you thriving? So the difference between resilience is the existing part, and then you go to the thriving part. So like for your wife, she went through the existing period and now she was going through the thriving part. So every person has this opportunity to decide when do you move from one stage to the other. Grief is a natural process. We all determine how much grief we need to experience. And then from there, we're able to move ourselves through that to say, now is the time for me to look for that existing part, for that thriving part. And that's when amazing tours like this, like the Living Undeterred tour, can really inspire people. That's when people can talk to mental health professionals. That's when people can work on ways in which to go from where they were to where they want to be. And every event, we have a first response is this moment of, oh my gosh, what am I going to do? To the second response is, what am I going to do? And so when we can come from a place of empowerment as opposed to a place of distrust, or of not understanding what we're going to do, or this fear or this anxiety, but when we can move on the other side of that, that's when that resilience moves to thriving.
Well, so I really value your insight tonight, James. It's been great to have you on the show. I've got another couple people waiting in the queue, but
of course,
and also wanted to thank you for introducing me to Chris as well.
Yes.
I'm excited to have a relationship now going through his company, and hopefully we can ratchet up our game a little bit on the publicist side.
Yes, I'm confident you all will. It's such a pleasure to meet you, Mike. Let's talk offline
Me
sometime.
too.
I'd definitely like to have you on my show. And Jeff, I'll see you on Thursday when you're going to be a guest on my show as well.
I
Thank
really
you.
look forward
Take
to
care,
it.
James.
Have a great night, James. Thanks.
All right, bye-bye.
Yep. Bye-bye. Yeah, there was a question, and I did want to get this. I did want to get this.
I saw
for,
that. Yeah.
for Christopher, and James is so good at answering. I was afraid to give him the question because he's so good and articulate. So, hey, I got 2 more people here. You guys are coming in here and wrapping up the show for us. But Kenyon, how you doing, man?
I'm freezing my butt off at a track meet right now.
Where are you at right now?
Were you in Anchorage?
We're in Dubuque. McKenna's
Okay.
McKenna's track meet. So
yeah, he has a
all
daughter
good.
still in high school, and his other 2 boys are off to the NBA, which we can talk about. Yeah, so super excited to have you on the show here to kind of wrap things up. We've had an unbelievable number of guests on tonight. That's just been very exciting. The different stories, the collective stories of all different types of grief and trauma and so forth. But specifically in your situation, and I think Jeff will come back here in a minute. I saw him on the screen, but he jumped off for a second. You and I go back a long ways, been friends for a very long time. We've been through, you, Coach Seth, you were involved in, your wife had a business, candle business with my wife. And, we've pretty much family growing up together. And you got thrust into the national spotlight and the mental health national spotlight with your son, Chris, who, Mike, both of his boys played at Iowa, and they're both in the NBA draft this year. And I expect him to go very high, both of them. But anyway, Chris had an incident at a game in Illinois in a game that was a big game for Illinois because they ended up winning the Big Ten championship that game. But do you mind sharing a little bit about what happened that day, Kenyon? And it really took the spotlight off sports and put it onto something more important, and that's mental health, and not just the kids playing, but the fans and everybody involved. And I couldn't believe the outpouring of support that you got, Kenyon, from not just the University of Illinois, but from around the country.
Yeah. I mean, it was an unfortunate situation. I mean, it was a great game. Obviously, two heated rivals, Iowa and Illinois, over the years. But, in the midst of Illinois winning the game and the fans rushing the court, which, that's a whole other subject in itself, there was a fan that ran out on the court and basically found my son and said, "You effing suck. You should go kill yourself." And this is in the midst of Illinois winning the game, winning the Big Ten championship, a time that they should be celebrating and jubilation with the team on the floor and their classmates. This person, he literally found an Iowa player and said that. And I don't think if it wasn't my son, it would have been somebody else on the team. But I'm one of those that I'm not afraid of social media. I'll call people to the carpet if there's something out there. You know me, I'm very, very transparent in that, and I'll go at people. But I think the thing that struck me more was the fact that a fan felt that it was okay to say something like that.
Right.
We go back to that old adage of sticks and stones.
Right.
But words hurt, words kill. And in the situation, my son, Chris is a very quiet kid. But what happened out of that was, I connected with some people at Illinois. I connected with some other people across the Big Ten, and there will be something done. Illinois has actually started a campaign called I Matter, and it's specifically geared towards, the mental health of not only students on campus, but student athletes. And
Right.
I think that people feel that it is a privilege to be a student athlete, but I don't think people understand the pressures that come with being a student athlete to perform at a high level. And we've seen that, you have a national championship goalie from Stanford who takes her own life. She's a great student. She's, there's all those kind of things. So I think what it's bringing to the forefront is that, one, fans are emboldened because they pay for a ticket. They feel like they can say anything to anybody. Two student athletes are just that. They're student athletes. They're students first, athletes second, but more importantly, they're people. And I think that's the one thing we really need to talk about is that, you know, there is a, I don't even know how to put it, but there is just, I mean, an infestation of people who feel like they can step over that line because they paid, you know, their money to get into a game. And that's where I kind of have to draw the line. And it's my kid. So, you know, I might not have taken up arms for somebody else. Hopefully this will help. But yeah, that's my kid. And I'm gonna do whatever I have to do to make sure that he is in a safe environment, that, you know, anybody that comes after him will also feel safe in an environment like that.
Well, I really applaud you, what your family did.
Wow.
You and Michelle stood up and like stood up to this school bully, and you went to social media, which is how you get your point across today. It's smart to leverage your resources that way. So, yeah, I'm very proud of what you guys did, and I appreciate you popping on here tonight and talking a little bit about your mental health, and good luck to your boys, man. Keegan and Chris are going to be in the draft this year. They're projecting Keegan as a lottery pick. Chris is going to test the waters, and a lot of Iowa fans are hoping he comes back.
Yeah.
But anyway, I'm going to have to. We're a little bit up to clock, Kenyon. So I got two more guests that are pop in. So love you like a brother, man. Appreciate all you've done, and I look forward to following the rest of the journey for you. And appreciate you coming on tonight.
That's
Absolutely,
awesome story.
Brother. Yep.
And we'll see you on the 7th. We'll see you on the 7th for the breakfast.
Look forward to meeting you. Thank you, Kenyon.
Absolutely. I look forward to seeing you.
Take care.
All right. Have a good night, Kenyon. Thanks. Bye-bye. Hey, Jennifer. Thanks for popping on here. Being a little spontaneous tonight. We've had a couple issues with people getting on and off, but here we are. We've got 30 minutes to go.
Yeah, no worries. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yes, thank you.
I have my favorite book here. And here's my second favorite book. That's Antarctic Mike there, Jennifer. So
it's actually a pleasure to meet you, Mike. I've heard a lot about you.
Thank you too. Are you in the Panhandle of Florida?
I am.
Nice to meet you.
Yeah, I'm hoping to catch you guys. I don't know if we're doing a stop here in this area or wherever you are.
Well, right now for Florida, we have Fort Lauderdale and we have Tampa.
Okay.
So you guys are a little north. But I think we're going to come up that. Well, actually, we have to leave.
We have to drive.
There's only one direction to leave Florida, and that's north.
Exactly.
So we're gonna be driving by. You can't miss us. We're in a big black RV.
Yeah,
It says
really.
living undeterred U.S. tour on it. But we'll certainly stop by and have a chance to meet you. But Jennifer's story is amazing, Mike. She's another advocate, and I got utmost admiration for what she's doing. You know, Jennifer, maybe give a little bit about your background, and then we'll talk a little bit about some of the projects that you're doing.
Yeah. So guys who don't know me, you know, 18 years ago, my husband and daughter were killed in a car crash, and I had two daughters survive that day. And most of the time, people, when they hear me speak on a stage or they hear me talk about my life and being diagnosed with PTSD and all of the things that I've kind of been through, anytime I mention the word suicide, people always assumed that my battle with suicide came after Brian and Brittany were killed. And it bothered me so much from the stage that it actually inspired me to write my first book, which was called Inside the Mind of Suicide. Because I felt very misunderstood as this person who is getting paid to come in and be a keynote speaker. And I hope this doesn't sound dismissive to anyone, but as I said, I'd be standing there in front of people and I'd be talking about the battle that I'd been facing through PTSD and suicide and all that. And when I would tell people that my husband and daughter were killed, it was almost as if they were like, oh, rightly so. I mean, I could see why you battled suicide because your husband and daughter were killed. Like, as if because I had gone through that, like, then it was okay for me to battle suicide.
Yeah, I'll follow you.
Like, it made me so angry, Jeff.
Right.
And so writing my book was my way of saying, oh, hell no. Oh, hell no. Like, I battled suicidal ideation so fiercely as a young mom of 3 little girls in a green minivan, was almost going to take my life with them in the back of the car. And and had to have the courage to walk myself into the psychiatric unit. In the psychiatric unit, I discovered things about myself. And that's really how I start off my book, Jeff, right? It's
Right. Oh, yeah.
Right? It's like I start off my book on this concept that I wish the world could grasp. Okay?
Right.
So that's why I wrote the book. But then 3 years later, Brian and Brittany are killed.
Mm-hmm.
And then people are like, I can't fathom that you are already battling suicidal ideation. You were struggling.
Right.
And yet now your husband and daughter are killed, and somehow you have the capacity to deal with this. So, for people who are listening, as you already know, you've read the book, like sometimes people will say to me, Jeff, like, well, what did you do? Or like, could you give us some advice? And it's like, I really can't. That's why I wrote the book.
Right.
Like,
right.
There is not a one size fits all solution.
Yeah.
And in the first chapter of my book, I say that we all come to that ledge so very differently.
Yeah.
And so we have to stop trying to solve a complex issue as though we're all on that same ledge.
I think what's important, Jennifer, and you and I talked about this a lot, is the fact that they can see how I'm doing it. They can see how you're doing it. They can see how Mike's doing it, how Amanda's doing it, how, everybody that's been on the show and all the people we're going to meet, is that we're all doing, this differently, and we're all achieving a different level of therapy from this.
Right.
But I think the key of the whole thing is vulnerability and being in action, doing something, getting out of bed, even if it's writing a book or doing a nonprofit or doing a podcast, do something. I've been enamored with your story. I want to get you on my show. I want to have an hour with you, because tonight we're up against the clock. I still got two more guests I got to get out here.
It's good to be short tonight. I really wanted to say hi and meet you, Mike, because I hadn't had a chance to even chat with you. And Jeff, you know that you've got my full support. I'm super proud of all you're doing and cheering you on all the way.
Well, we're going to collaborate
Thank
together. And even after the tour, we got some ideas of working together down the road to help people. So I'll circle back with you. But thanks so much for being on here tonight. I very much appreciate it. It means a lot to me.
Yeah. Bye, guys.
Good night, Jennifer.
Bye-bye. Thanks, Jennifer. I feel bad having to hurry people through, but each show. Hey, Randy, how you doing, man?
Hey, Jeff. Hey, Mike. Nice to see
Randy.
you all again.
Hey, I got to show you something, Randy. This is sitting here behind my desk.
That's so awesome. I'm glad you kept it.
Yeah, mine's at my house.
I saw him 2 weeks ago in Davenport.
Oh, you saw the show?
Yeah, man, talk about an awesome show. I mean, he for 73, he can still rock.
He's such an amazing performer. You can learn so much from him.
Yeah. Well, thanks for being here. You guys are our last two that takes us up to the end of the show. So, maybe 15 minutes or so, we can talk a little bit about our stop in Phoenix, Randy, and then Patrick, man, where do I start with you, brother? You're the godfather of this whole group,
Well, I'm looking forward to it.
I have your
think
book right here.
Yeah. Yep. There's a solution.
Yeah.
There is a problem, and we know it's a problem. If we can identify the problem, we can actually bring a solution. So that's my goal.
So Randy, Patrick has an interesting story. He has a book out called Prehab, and I read this about a year ago, and that's when I reached out to Patrick, and he was one of my early followings in regards to working with addiction and substance abuse. And he's got a lot of groundbreaking research from years ago that's kind of been lost. And now there's a resurgence with a lot of his work. And so he's going to be one of our stops in Georgia, and I'm really excited about hooking up with him. And, but Randy, I have to real quickly thank you and Jeff for allowing us to partner with you guys when we stop in Phoenix, because out of all the stops that we have, there's probably the most buzz is on Alice Cooper's, Solid Teen Rock Center stop. And Mike and I had such a great time you and Jeff are so gracious and so hospitable that you're going to get our best efforts when we come out there. And the fact that you're one of our last stops, we ought to be a well-oiled machine by the time we get to Phoenix.
We enjoyed our visit together. Look forward to seeing you guys in August.
Yeah. So a little bit, let's start with you, Randy, and then I'll kick over to Patrick. But, Alice's involvement in the, substance abuse and addiction space comes from his willingness to talk and be vulnerable about his sobriety. And when I met him in Las Vegas, he was pretty clear that, it's been a 40-year journey for him. But does he spend time at the teen center actually sharing his story with a lot of the kids there?
Yeah, our organization started 26 and a half years ago, and Alice and his wife Cheryl are very hands-on involved. And whenever they're in town, as often as possible, they're working directly with the kids. They call kids, they text kids when they're on the road. They're very, very hands-on, and they're here doing songwriting classes, playing foosball with kids, jamming with kids, listening to music. Cheryl personally does recording classes. When we do a lot of various social media videos, whether they're commercials for other brands and other partnerships, we have kids in the commercials with Alice. So we have a lot of our events that teens are on stage directly with Alice performing. We engage with teens with Alice as often as possible. That's very important.
Yeah, I think that giving back and the influence he can have on a generation of kids is amazing. Patrick, going back to you're on the clinical side and probably what I would consider probably the most clinical side of anyone I work with. Your research has really uncovered a lot of misconceptions and myths about addiction and substance abuse. In a nutshell, what would you say has been the most, eye-opening learning process for you in regards to, maybe we can focus just on alcoholism, but I would say substance abuse and addiction in general?
Well, the cause is what I learned that there was no cause. I studied it as if there was no cause. I was not looking for the cause of addiction. I was looking for a way to measure prevention education. Being the idea, are we wasting our time in their lives or not? And why can't we do this? And when I accepted that challenge and did that, I had to put together models. And I was in a place where I could do this, and I had the models. And I was interested in that stuff, but I worked at a treatment center, so I know 12-step stuff. So I put these models together and did a literature review and found that it is measurable. And what I was measuring were the ones I was looking for, which was one of my big goals. But what I wasn't and couldn't measure was everybody else. And that's a big problem in research because obviously I missed something. There's something there. I found the absence of something. And the fact is there is no absence of development. We're going to develop. If we're breathing, we're developing. That's simple. There's no absence of developing. There's our misinterpretation of it. So I would say my biggest discovery was we tend to assume people who are addicted stop developing when they stop using because that's what it looks like. And that's common sense, and everybody gets behind on that. But no, that's not it at all. They're very highly developed. They developed with a different pattern. And all the ones I couldn't measure, I had data on. And that was the thing that broke the code on me. With research, you can't do research and then guess at what you found. That's a no-no. That's a scientific no-no. That's called post hoc theorizing. But if you have data, you can do post hoc analysis. And that's what I did, which means I have data that suggests that most of the population uses the exact same attributes to develop with in a slightly different pattern. That's all it is. And I can compare and contrast these patterns. And anybody that goes through my 45-minute presentation can identify their pattern. Now, if they don't have my stuff, they can't identify it, and nothing changes.
Yeah, this is
there
one of
you
the
go.
reasons.
So we're fucked. So
one of the reasons why one of the reasons why we're trying to do this tour, guys, is that I want to find alternative methods. I want to find, if what we were doing, and you looked at all the statistics and suicidal ideation, attempted suicide, overdoses, alcoholism, if they were even plateauing, then I would say maybe we don't even need to do this, Mike. Maybe we don't need to go on the road. But they're not. And when Seth died, there was 65,000 overdoses. There was 105,000 last year. In less than 5 years, it's doubled. So, and I just don't see anything really changing. And so hopefully in this 95-day Odyssey we're on, I can meet people that are involved with, brainwave technology or, things that are, maybe a little alternative, maybe a little, confrontational or what's the word I'm looking for?
Unconventional, perhaps.
Yeah. Because I think, again, going back to my narrative, if things were working, we wouldn't be doing this. So, Randy, when we were in Phoenix, we were talking about some of the issues in the Phoenix area. And I think if I remember right, you said there was a proliferation of suicide issues there in the area, almost even more than fentanyl overdoses. Is that an accurate statement?
Well, we focus on teens ages 12 to 20, and I was talking to our staff earlier today. The teen rate, I don't have exact data, but the teen suicide rate in Arizona is very high. And in fact, the New York Times actually noticed, why is Mesa, which is 20 miles east of our center, and we have our second teen center there, one of the highest suicide rates in the entire U.S. And we have a very high, unfortunate suicide rate. And we really make an effort to make connection by listening to teens and of what they're going through, because we've seen several teens here, not commit suicide as a result of coming to our teen centers. And we've seen teens struggle with that way before COVID. We've been open for, 10 years, but COVID has increased a lot of anxiety with teens. But yeah, unfortunately, where we live in Arizona, the suicide rate is very high.
Yeah.
Randy, I'm so impressed that the thing that, and I can't tell you how many people I've told this story to, because I tell stories for a living all over the country. The story of that gal named Tess.
Yep.
Yeah.
And, this teenage girl in Phoenix that's suicidal and basically is dragged to the teen rock center for a music lesson. Like somebody at the school said, no, you don't understand. You're going to get a music lesson, right? So she goes and, like, she hadn't missed a day and her life is different now and she's doing well. And I'm like, what stands out to me is how, a guy like Alice Cooper, I mean, he makes his living in music. And, if all he does is entertain people, there's nothing wrong with that. But it almost seems like Alice, and I'd love to ask him this question, it almost seems like music is like the vehicle to create this purpose to turn people's lives around. Music isn't the end all be all. It's people like Tess that are the end all be all. And it's so honorable to see people in the real, because I think it's going to take an effort, not just people who are music stars, but average everyday people getting involved in people's lives like Tess. And there got to be a million Tesses out there all over the place, right? Whether it's suicide or drugs or depression or whatever it is, and get involved in their life. And you use the word listen. I'm in Reading, Pennsylvania today, and I spent the morning at a breakfast with 400 people, and this is a nonprofit association in central Pennsylvania, and they cater to people who've come out of prison to help these people turn their lives around and go back into the real world and function. And I met hundreds of people. There were 400 people at this thing this morning. Half the crowd were people who were incarcerated, got out, and their lives are turned around. And it's like it takes special efforts to help these folks like Tess and like these people that were incarcerated to find that road to what we call life. And it's just so honorable to see a guy like Alice doing that. And I think that's an example for the rest of a lot of us in the real world to make an effort to do that, to be involved in the lives of these people like Tess.
Yeah, that's beautiful. They're doing that. And speaking of that, last year we made a presentation to a high school that's all juvenile correctional facility youth, and we do programming for some of that high school. And we had a contest with a local restaurant, and kids in the community got a chance to create their own hamburger recipe and their own shake recipe with a guy that was on the Food Network, Chef Tommy. He was on Shock. And two of the girls created a shake recipe that were in that facility, and they actually won the shake contest, the recipe contest. And they told us they've never won anything in their life. They've never had any attention. They've never had any potential hope. And when we heard that they won, I told the lady who runs the center, I said, I have an idea. Let me call you back in 5 minutes. And I called, one of our advisors, and I said, she's on the board for the community colleges here. And I said, hey, these two girls won. They're in the correctional facility. I don't want any BS and red tape and wait 2 months. Let's get them a college scholarship now. And we'll worry about the finances later, but let's approve one now. And she's like, okay, let's do it. I'll call you back in a couple minutes. She called me back in a couple minutes, and she goes, tell the two girls that the moment they get out of the facility, they're going to go to college. And we called them back. And we got them both college scholarships within 15 minutes. And they both got released about 4 months later. And one's going to school now to be an elementary teacher. And one teen is going to school to be, I believe, a dentist. And we're so honored to be able to provide that positive pathway for those, type of kids. And, and another example is a few months ago, I was teaching a class, and one of our young girls, I'll call her Dana, just to use a random name, said, I'm in the middle of a class with 25 kids. And she goes, I have a song. Can I play you the song? I said, yeah, I'd love to hear it. And she goes, can I play it for you right now? My first instinct was, I'm in the middle of class and no, let's do this later, but I'm like, this is important to this kid for that very moment. And you never know what's going on in that kid's life. And I said, if you're willing to play it for the whole class, I'm down. And a lot of it is just acknowledging the teens where they're at. Yeah, and if they're willing to be vulnerable with you in that very moment, that was very important to that young girl. And we kind of throw out the rule book, so traditionally it'd be like, yeah, let's do that tomorrow. Let's do that later. That's very important to that kid now. And I don't know what that kid is thinking about 5 minutes from now, 5 hours from now, but she really needed to be heard and acknowledged in that moment.
I think with vulnerability, Randy, you get this window.
With or not, but for her, that could have been a really life-saving moment right there just by being listened to.
Wow. Yeah, with vulnerability, you get a window of opportunity, and that was a good example where you guys bent the rules a little bit, did it, and it could have been one of those little things that could have been a big thing in that person's life. I want to make a comment here. Rick Porter says, I'm trying to read this from a distance, giving teens an outlet is so important. It sounds like your center is doing amazing things, Randy. So that's
Thanks,
from Rick
Come
Porter,
on over. We'd love to show you.
Well, we're going to be there with a documentary crew, and we're going to have a full report. But anyway, so guys, I think it's going to be a wrap for you two. Mike and I are going to spend the last 10 minutes kind of wrapping up the show. But Randy, any last things you want to say to support the tour, or any comments about what you guys are doing, or how people can reach you and learn more?
Well, we're just so honored to connect with you guys, and our teen center is no restrictions. We're for every teen possible. There's no restrictions at all. I don't know how to share my contact information with the entire group, but I put it in the private chat. If you guys can maybe share that with the group. But we're honored to have you guys, and look forward to seeing you in Phoenix. We've got a good group of teachers and people in the community, and anybody that wants to call me or reach out to us and know more information, we'd be honored to connect. And if anyone's in Phoenix or the Phoenix area, come on over and say hello. So we're honored to do this, and we appreciate you including us today.
Well, if you treat
Thank you.
people half as well as you treated Mike and I, then they're in for a treat. We are honored to stop out there. So,
Hey, we've got free enchiladas today. We've got a food program. So if you happen to show up on Tuesdays, we'll even feed you. So a lot of teens need meals and they struggle without food at home. So we've got a great program with the city of Phoenix. So come over on Tuesdays and we'll give you a free meal.
I'm going to take you up on that. Well, have a great night, Randy. Thanks again for being a part of this tonight.
Thanks for including us. You have a safe night,
Patrick,
as well.
I guess you're the lone wolf now, man. Again, what are some of your last thoughts on this this mental health crisis we seem to having? Because that's really the theme of our tour, is the mental health initiative. You know, what words of wisdom can you tell people that are really trying to find answers to some of these questions that they have?
I don't wait for them to look for answers. That's too late. So the guys we're talking about at Alice Cooper's place, I want them 5 years before they get there. So the kids that are going to die tonight, I'd like to have seen them 10 years ago. They should have had this information in front of them through some educational outlet in a way that they can refer back to it.
Yeah, and I'm
the
sure
more it's out there, the better we're going to do.
Yeah, I would wholeheartedly agree with that. I go back even with my son's issues, even my wife's issues, and I go way back to the genesis, you know, back when he was 3 and 4 and 5, you know, and some of the things that I know now, some of the signs I could have seen, some of the data that you have that would have been warning me when he gets to college and those type of things, some of the things to look for, the stages that you talk about in your book. Yeah, there's no question. I would think Alice Cooper would say, I hope I'm out of business. I hope this nonprofit shuts down. I'm sure those guys, and I'd love to be not going around the country too. Trust me. But unfortunately, there's a demand out there that got to start somewhere. And I think your research, Patrick, needs to be heard more. And I'm going to be a beacon to provide that for people when I'm on the tour. And I'm looking forward to partnering up with you.
Let me know how I can help. That's a good thing. You got my web address?
Yep.
And we can come back and you can tell them you're doing research and you're looking at things. And if anybody wants to really make a difference, we're going to actually be proactive. And treating symptoms is going to have to go on for the rest of our lifetimes. But we can do better than that.
Yeah. Well, thank you for your advocacy. Thank you for all the work that you do, your tireless work. I mean, you're on LinkedIn more than I am, man. I think he's got a bigger presence than you and I combined, Mike. Yeah, he's a hard worker. You're one of the hardest workers I know in this.
It's a target-rich environment, I must say.
Well, you've been a great friend and asset for what we're doing, and I'm looking forward to actually shaking your hand here shortly. So.
Well, thanks for your patience, and I think the people you're going to see here in Roswell are education based. They're hooked into schools. They're counselors going into schools. This is a good model, and we got to be part of that. So I look forward to see what's going to happen.
All right, brother. Have a good night. We're going to wrap up,
Patrick.
Mike, you and I.
Alrighty.
For those people still, thanks, Patrick. For those people still hanging on, Molly's going to show a couple pictures of the RV. Obviously we're going to have more pictures down the road. But I want to recommend everyone visit the website. All the tour stops will be, there it is. That's our home, Mike. The Living Undeterred RV, a mental health initiative. That was taken today, and you can see that the wrap's going on very well. And I think next week they're going to be done. But if this doesn't draw attention to the problem that we have with mental health in our country, then Mike, I don't know what you and I can do, dude.
We're doing everything we can. And I think that the thing that I'm also really looking forward to is not just the tour, but what the tour will create. The tour is going to create, is going to set people in motion. Right. And it's going to allow us to build a tribe of people online who can connect to each other, who can connect to professionals for help, and who can be listened to. I mean, I think the thing that was the biggest aha moment of the whole 2 hours here was when Randy talked about people being heard. I could tell you story after story of people's lives that turn around, who choose better and not bitter, simply because somebody just took the time to listen to them, like really listen. And I think that's kind of a lost art and science in our world today. Partially, I don't blame people necessarily. Partially, there's so much noise around us that seems like it's screaming louder and louder and louder at us like that, that it makes really listening to people more difficult. And I think we have to, there's no substitute for that.
Right. And
there's no therapy, no procedure, no research that substitutes for somebody really listening.
This could have been the fastest 2 hours of my life. What a great evening. What a great opportunity to share stories, be vulnerable, talk. And people are probably wondering what's next. You know, how do you guys going to change the narrative? Well, we are putting together a program called After the Tour, which we're going to have available for people. We don't know what that is yet. We're kind of building this boat on the water, Mike and I like to say. But there's certainly a demand out there for people helping in this space. There's certainly people that aren't happy in their lives. There's people struggling with addiction and substance abuse. And we want to provide an outlet for people and connect people together and give them hope and inspiration, and not just incarceration and fear. Give people a reason to get up in the morning and be excited. And so if people want to help, and again, we would be honored for people to help in any capacity. They can volunteer. Our kickoff is May 7th at the Cedar Rapids Marriott. Donations are obviously the quickest and easiest way to help us. They can donate at livingundeterred.org. And there's also a QR scan code right on the screen tonight that you can take a picture of with your phone. Every dollar counts. You may feel like $20 isn't going to make a difference, but if I got, 100,000 people to do $20, it adds up. So, with that, Mike, I don't have anything else. I think we're 4 minutes from shutting this down, but do you have any last words of wisdom you want to add? And I do want to remind people, we still have room for the kickoff breakfast on May 7th. They can contact us at livingundeterred.org. That's just my dog reminding me that I'm up against the clock too. So
I'll
have you wrap this up, Mike.
Yeah, I think it's just it's an honor, Jeff. And I go back to last April when we first ran into each other online. And I just, you look at the last couple of years. I mean, last couple of years have been challenging for all of us around the world for obvious reasons. We were all forced to have much of our communication and interaction like we're doing here tonight. And yet, if that hadn't happened, we may not have gotten on Zoom. I don't know that. Right. I mean, that's a hypothetical question we'll never know the answer to, but we may never have had that opportunity. And because we did, here we are now. And, the two bozos, the clowns, are going to be rolling around the country with a camera, as we like to say. But yet, it's funny because people are like, oh, do you guys really know what you're doing? And I'm like, well, kind of, but not really. Probably closer to not really, but we kind of do. And it really doesn't matter because we're going to build the boat on the water. The bottom line is we care. Right. We care. And we want to go meet people where they are and listen and just help them and be a bit of a beacon, right? I mean, we're not going to win the war on drugs. We're not going to eradicate drugs and alcohol from the streets of the earth. That's not realistic. But if we can find one test, like Alice Cooper said in that board meeting, right? When he said, hey, if this is all we accomplished for 30 years was turning that girl's life around, and that's all we do in the next 30, I'm in for 30 more, right? It's like, that's the attitude we have to have. We're all making if we just make a little contribution. And you know what? I have a funny feeling it's going to be big contributions because of the movement that we start and lots of people. The tribe that we assemble online and the people will be helping each other. It won't be you and I. It will be all the participants helping the other participants.
Well, I want to personally thank you for being on the team. I want to thank Alan and Anthony. I want to thank Molly and Sarah and everybody's work behind the scenes. I get a lot of credit for what I do, and Molly's the wizard behind the curtain for most of what people see. So I'm very grateful to have these fine people in my life, and I know we're going to be adding more people on the bus on this journey. So with that, man, keep living undeterred, brother. Appreciate all you're doing and all your friendship, man.
Thank you. Love you, Jeff. Good night.
Thanks. Have a great night. Thanks, everybody, for catching the show. And we look forward to seeing you on the tour. If you have any questions, you can reach us at livingundeterred.org. And we are super excited. And again, thanks for all your support. And keep living undeterred. Have a great night. Thank you.